Hi! In this video I want to share some ideas and techniques that took me 6 months to figure out. In Atmos, glue and separation work a bit differently. We don't always need to rely on EQ or other processing. We can use panning. But before we explore different panning ideas, let's listen to the stereo downmix of the track we will be working with.
Don't mean to shelter us with distrust, so I light another cigarette. But when you look at me like that, I wonder.
You might have noticed that most of the signal comes from the left and right channels. Let's listen to them.
Don't mean to shelter us with distrust,
Acoustic guitars are in the sides.
so I light
Let's add the rear and top channels.
But when you look at me like that, I wonder, do you feel it all? Or
I added back strings, reverbs, delays and effects. Overall, this is not a very crazy mix. Now, let's imagine the artist comes to you and says they want a bit more separation of the vocal from the instrumental. There are several ways you can do that. The easiest way to achieve this is to pan the vocal to a point in the 3D space where there are no other instruments. In this case, the center is pretty empty. Let's listen to the center channel.
don't mean to shelter us with distrust, so I light.
There is reverb and a bit of bass, but it's empty enough if you ask me. So let's pan the vocal more to the center.
Don't mean to shelter us with distrust, so I light another cigarette.
Because my object bus is in stereo, when I make it less wide there is a significant level boost, which you have to be mindful of. Now let's listen to what is going on in the left and right channels, and in the center.
Don't mean to shelter us with distrust, so I light another cigarette.
The dry signal from the vocal is pretty loud, and it mixes well with the reverb from other instruments.
Don't mean to shelter us with distrust, so I light another cigarette.
In the left and right channels you can barely hear the vocal. It's still there, but very low in volume. By panning the vocal to a different place, I actually separated it from the rest of the instrumental with a very simple move. But the center channel was not completely empty, and that was deliberate. You have to have a bit of crosstalk between channels to have a sense of glue. By determining how much of the signal from different tracks overlaps, we can control the glue factor. Let's listen to the side surrounds. There is a bit of reverb from the vocal and instruments like percussion, but mostly there are just acoustic guitars. In the left and right channels, there are main electric guitars, percussion, and another acoustic guitar. In the rears, there is another percussion track and reverb. And in the overhead speakers, there are strings and more effects. Now let's solo only the center, left, right and side channels.
Don't mean to shelter us with distrust, so I light another cigarette. But when you look at me like that,
This is basically the core of the song. Some elements are separated, and some are panned to the same points in space. Now I will rebalance the vocal so that most of the signal comes from the left and right channels.
Don't need to shelter us with distrust. So I light another cigarette. When you look at me like that, I wonder, do you feel at all? Or am I delusional?
It's not very noticeable in the down mix, but now I just have enough level from the vocal to support the phantom center while gluing the vocal to the instrumental a lot more. Let's see what happens if I mute the center channel.
Don't need to shelter us with distrust. So I light another cigarette. When you look at me like that, I wonder, do you feel at all?
The change is not that big. Now the center plays a sort of supporting role, allowing the vocal to glue more with the instrumental and also gluing the left and right channels. Basically, we glued two different points in space together. In this case, I augmented the phantom center between the left and right channels by using the center channel. Another way to achieve this is by using effects. Instead of panning the vocal more to the center, I will use slapback delay.
Don't need to shelter us with distrust. Another cigarette. When you look at me like that, I wonder, do you feel at all? Or am I delusional? Don't need to shelter us with distrust. So I light another cigarette. When you look at me like that, I wonder, do you...
It sounds basically just like a dry vocal, but you don't really hear it in the mix. It supports the phantom center, but doesn't separate the vocal from the instrumental too much. And we can do similar things with any other instrument. You can pan choruses, delays and reverbs instead of panning the tracks themselves. These strategies are very simple but effective and fun, and this is where you have to experiment and find what works for you. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.